right, we are getting started. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Original Characters panel, the last writing panel for this BronyCon, hopefully best for last. I am GAP Jaxie. I wrote Siren Song, but most people know me better for Would It Matter If I Was or Acting Verse.
I'm Captain Unstoppable. I am the author behind Macintosh Apple the Ghostwriter and Baby School Outside, but most people know me as the co-author of Ponyville Bachelor Auction.
I'm Barack Panza. I wrote some stories for the OC Slam Jam, and I got pretty far into it. And I've also been known to write stories for the World Building Alliance, where I made a lot of non-pony OCs. Most people might know me as a Seattle's Angel, though.
I'm Wanderer D. I'm a moderator for FilmFictionNet and author. I've written a whole bunch of stories with OCs in them. I'll try and make my limited knowledge on those things interesting for you guys.
I'm Captain Chrysalid. I'm most well known in this particular fandom for Best Night Ever, Platinum Crown, and among some circles, World of Ponycraft, a few others. And this in particular, Platinum Crown is what I'm known for in my OCs, since that's the most OC-heavy fic I've done. I've written in many other fandoms as well, which some people may or may not recognize me from.
So in this panel, we're going to be covering how to create compelling original characters. That can be, quote unquote, your OC, the pony you use to represent yourself. That can be original ponies for your MLP fan fiction. That can be totally original characters in non-MLP works. Whatever, if it's a character that you have created out of whole cloth, how do you make people like that character? Now there's a bunch of advice out there already on how to do this. Don't make them a red and black alicorn. Your character should have flaws that the audience finds compelling. They should be sympathetic, etc., etc. But you can Google all of that, and on its own, that advice to...
Please turn off your cell phones.
Judgment. But on its own, that advice doesn't do you a whole lot of good. It's like being shoved into the deep end of the pool and someone shouting instructions on how to swim while you are drowning. So instead, what we're going to say is, if you can Google all of that advice if you want it, instead in this panel, each of us is going to have a few minutes to give their practical advice on talking to writers. What do we do that helps us make compelling original characters? And then we will have time for questions at the end, so we're just going to go through the panel. And I will be opening with the 5 adjectives method, which is a quick rule of thumb. It's not an absolute rule, but I find it to be very helpful, which is every character's personality should be summarized by 5 simple descriptions, and within one scene of meeting the character, the audience should know 3 of them. This is a great rule of thumb for making the characters memorable and making sure that the audience is very quickly introduced to why they're memorable so they don't have to wait. So I'm going to walk you through a quick example, which is this character you may have heard of. She's from some cartoon. I don't know. It seems like it's a kid's thing. But pretend she is your OC, because she's a very memorable character. Within one episode of meeting Twilight, you know a lot about her, well enough for the season 1 fan fiction was the thing. Yeah, total, no. So what makes Twilight compelling? So first, 5 adjectives, 5 simple descriptors that give a rough summary of the character's personality. What would Twilight's be? Well, Twilight is scholarly, she is socially awkward, she is faithful, she is proud, and she is insecure. And now you can quibble about, if these are the best 5 options to pick, and there are lots of other aspects of the character's personality that these don't reflect. It's a quick rule of thumb, but roughly that's Twilight. And these 5 traits all get introduced within the first episode, and 3 of them get introduced within her first scene. First, scholarly. Very straightforward. When we see her, she's studying. She uses studying to solve problems. Very show, don't tell. We see Twilight as scholarly almost from the word go. Again, socially awkward. Now this is different from being rude or being antisocial or being introverted. We don't just see that she blows off her friends to go study as part of scholarly. She's kind of embarrassed by the fact that she's blowing them off. She's awkward. She is pulling her head back. Again, we are shown this trait almost immediately within her first scene. Proud. And I'd love to claim this was an opportunistic screenshot, but that is actually the expression Twilight assumes when she is describing how Celestia just trusts her so much, because Smug Horse is Smug Horse.
Backfires 5 minutes later.
It does, but we see this as a huge trait of her character. Insecure, we don't see until later in the episode, and the way we see this is very well portrayed. Twilight has spent the entire chariot ride to Ponyville talking about how she's absolutely certain that making friends is a waste of time, that she has this far more important mission to do, that she's completely confident in her own abilities. We see proud, the character trait that has already been established, and then Spike just says, come on, give it a chance. Just try.
Do it.
And no, not that again. And Twilight hesitates and goes, okay, fine. That for all that she is proud and confident in her own abilities, she is easily swayed by others. And faithful, we're told she's faithful at many points throughout the episodes, but we don't really see it until the end. That when Celestia shows up, Twilight is overjoyed to see her. We get that emotional reaction. And so Twilight, by the end of the first episode, we have these 5 clear traits that reasonably summarize her as a character. We've seen all of them. She's within one scene memorable, and by the end of the episode, we have a pretty strong idea of who she is. And so you can do this with the same writing. 5 descriptors. The audience should know 3 of them within the first scene, and should know all of them by the end of the first major character interaction. But if you'll go back and look at this list, these 2, well, they're not exactly contradictory. But if you were just reading this off on the list and didn't know Twilight Sparkle, you would say those things don't really seem to go together. You have a character who is very proud, legitimately very confident in their own abilities, but who is also very insecure. And that leads to the addendum: to make interesting characters, at least 2 of their 5 descriptors should appear to conflict in some way. Because unfortunately, people are complicated and we really don't make sense. How am I for time? Okay, I'm good. I'm going to quickly use my own story as an example. Some of you may have read Siren Song. The descriptors I used for Siren Song when writing that were Siren is vain, pretentious, artistic, analytical, and self-loathing were her 5 defining traits. And you can see the obvious contradiction there, that she hates herself, but also at the same time is very proud of her appearance. But also a minor one in her approach to problem solving. Sometimes she is very analytical, she is very by the book, very just tell me the facts, that's all I need to know. Other times she pontificates at great length upon the narrative symbolism of the bad guys trying to kill her. And that defines a lot of her conflicts as a character. Likewise, another rule that I find that's very helpful for this, if you're struggling with it, is do yourself, because I hope you are all interesting, complicated characters who are the main characters of your own lives. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Believe in yourself. So you can do yourself as an idea for how this works. So doing myself, GAP Jaxie, is ambitious, proud, social, introverted, and depressed. No sympathy, please. But meeting me, you will see very quickly, I'm very goal-oriented, I am ambitious. When someone said, hey, do you want to do a panel on original characters? I said, yes, I'm the fandom's greatest authority on this subject. And I really like hanging out with people. I've been in Sofas and Quills the whole con. It's been fantastic. I've been chatting with people the whole time. But at the same time, I'm introverted. There's times when I've had enough, and I really need to be alone. And much as I like my own abilities, dealing with depression has been a big thing for me. And that struggle has defined my character. And little conflicts like that are what make your OCs more interesting. So I've got 2 minutes left. And so if we can get one volunteer from the audience who is willing to do themselves. You're sure? All right. What's your name? Or handle, whichever you prefer.
Stormspark.
Stormspark. Okay. What are your 5 traits, at least 2 of which conflict?
Let's see. One of which is defiant.
Defiant. Okay, you make your own rules.
Another one is old-fashioned.
Old-fashioned. I'm going to put traditional.
That works too.
Okay.
Guess you could say heroic.
Let's get a little more specific than that.
Okay. How would you describe like very logical to plan things out?
Methodical.
Yeah. There you
All
go.
right, methodical. Sure.
But then he also sometimes uses his emotions to think things out.
Can I go with hot-headed?
There you go.
Okay.
And I guess you could say, well, this is hard. Let's
It's okay. That's the point of the exercise. That very frequently when people are building characters, it's way too easy to get the core concept, and forcing the 5 adjectives out kind of fleshes it out. Can you give me one more?
How about eager?
Eager, okay. And so looking at this, you can see how this can lead to character conflicts. You have, for instance, hot-headed versus methodical, or eager versus methodical. That this is a character who, by how he thinks the best way to solve problems is to carefully think them through, but by impulse blows up and rushes into the situation headlong. Or you can have, defiant and traditional. That this is a character versus methodical. That this is a character who may be very logical in how he approaches problems, but at the same time he knows what he knows and he will not be dissuaded by facts. Or however you want to play that.
Exactly how my OC is.
Perfect. Then these are the conflicts that make the character compelling. And I'm out of time, so you want next?
Yeah.
Okay, go nuts.
I'd like to talk a bit about sort of matching a character that you're creating to like the scope in which you have them. Say you could have a very small character appearing for just a scene versus a character that you're creating to be the protagonist of your story. And for me, a lot of it comes down to how much detail you're giving out about that character, like how much detail you're letting show through. And these details often involve like this character's story. And like for each original character I create, I have some level of a story for them, and it could be something as complex as a backstory, but it could also just be something as simple as how did they get to this moment? Why are they here in this store buying this pie? Why are they treating a child the way that they're treating them? Just what about this person brought them to this moment? And I like to keep that in mind. And also, his 5 adjectives example is not a method I've ever used myself. It sounds great. Personally, I consider something I guess you would call like social layers of a character. How a character might act when they're alone versus when they're with friends versus when they're with strangers. And I also use adjectives to describe like we could consider Trixie. Maybe Trixie when she's alone is depressed, she's downtrodden, she's guilty maybe. When she's with friends, she might be we've never seen her with friends. She might be warm, she might be eager to please even, but in the scope of the show, we've seen her with strangers where she's haughty, she's boastful, and she's very forceful in her character. And you can have these things in mind, like no matter the size of your character, you can have these things in mind, and it comes down to how much you want to put onto the page is going to determine like how complex your readers think these characters are, like how much of these stories and how much of these traits you bring out. And you're basically fighting the situation where you've not put enough thought beforehand into these, even the smallest character. You're fighting the situation where you've not put enough thought into them that they'll come off as just the most basic, bland character you could have created. Like, your protagonist could walk into a bar and talk to the bartender, and if the bartender doesn't have, like, if he doesn't treat your character a certain way, if in your head you're not thinking to yourself, this bartender would probably feel like this brash, loud person is someone to dismiss, or something in that vein. Like if you don't know how your small character is going to feel about your protagonist, or vice versa, it's not going to result in something that feels like a real person. And essentially, you want to avoid situations where, like, especially if you're working on a main character now, you want to avoid situations where you haven't thought enough about how a character would act in their given situation, that you are, say, explaining to your readers in a blog or in your comments, like, why a character acted the way they did. You want to make it clear, like, what's driving this person, what's behind who they are and where they are and what they're doing. You, like, it's all up to your comfort level, of course. Like, there's no hard ruling on how much detail a given character is going to need to be complex, but sorry, I'm struggling here. You can't, there's no hard ruling on how much a character needs to be complex, but, sorry, panicking a bit, sorry.
It's okay. Do you want to come back to you in a bit?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Next up.
Next up, I'm going to be talking about getting the mind of your character, just how to make your character think, feel, all that, those internal struggles within their mind. Yeah, just.
Slides, why did we have them?
Technology is horrible, I'm sorry. So getting inside your character's head. These are the questions I think are important when you are writing your character. What do you need to be thinking about while you're writing? And it's like, how do they think? How do they react? How would they react this way? And how do they talk? Now, you might be asking, talking in mind, not the same thing, but when they're talking out loud, they're still pretty much thinking, and you need to know how they would properly react. And you just gotta make sure you're staying true to the character you created. The one I'm going to be talking about is my OC for the OC Slam Jam, Iron Curtain, compared to someone like Big Mac. And yes, he is a Russian communist pony. He's glory to motherland. All for Stalingrad. So, who is Iron Curtain? And the 5 adjectives is the great way to start this, is when you're trying to think about that character. When I created Iron Curtain, I did a lot of research on Russia during the Soviet Union. I wanted to make him the most stereotypical 1950s Russian possible, because that is the best Russian. Thank you. So, he is a communist. So, first thing, research communism, make sure you understand what that means. And one way I did this was, I have a coworker who is, he grew up in the Soviet era. He talks in broken sentences. He sounds very Russian, but if you call him Russian, he's Ukrainian. If you ever met a Ukrainian and called him Russian, that's a very bad idea. I learned that the hard way. So, what is this typical communist character? He is going to be a soldier first, because in 1950s Russia, pretty much all males were in the army, so they all had that strict structure. He's not going to back down, he's going to get his work done, he's not going to be lazy or sloppy. And when you're thinking about this character and getting into his mind, that's how he should react to situations. If he is in a situation where someone's taking a picnic, he's going to be angry because maybe their work's not done and he thinks you need to be working until that is done. And that's how you're going to get into the mind of your character, is making sure you know the research behind it. Even if it's yourself, you don't want to make your character fluid, where they're just going to melt into the situation to be the perfect character for that. They might be the worst character in that situation. So, and we all know Big Mac. So, real quick, I need an example from an audience member of a situation. Please keep it PG. You there with the steampunk goggles.
Okay, thanks for the compliment. Movie theater.
Okay, movie theater. Iron Curtain, think of a 1950s guy. He's going to be sitting there going, why is this not a movie about motherland? He's going to be sitting there like this, going, What is with this? Commercials? No. I want to see movie about motherland now.
Best accent, 10 out of 10.
Thank you. I got that from Nico Bellic. Yeah. So now he's going to react that way. He's going to be very impatient because he wants it done now. He's going to pretty much think to himself the entire movie how it's not to his standards, or he's going to praise it because it is praising all of Stalingrad. But now, Big Mac, he's just going to sit there and go, yep. And we've all seen him talk a little bit, especially when he got.
It's too big to handle on your own.
Yes. He's going to be very simple about what he thinks. He's going to be very okay with it. Iron Curtain, no. Never okay. Niet. So, I guess the one thing I need to really say is stay true to your character when you're writing them. Make sure you're looking back. Don't just leave a part undone without truly thinking about it, because you're going to, if you're making this OC about yourself, you got to make sure it's how you would react, not why they should react this way to make it perfect. Put yourself in that situation. What would you truly do? And what would your OC truly do? Because all of us are flawed, and we might be the worst person for that situation, or we could be the best. You just got to make sure when you're thinking about your character, you're thinking through their eyes, or in the case of Iron Curtain, one eye. Glory to motherland. I'm done.
How did he lose the one eye?
Fighting pigs. Capitalist pigs.
All right, I guess it's my turn now. So, what I would like to talk about is about the relationship your characters, your OCs will have to the world, what necessity you actually have to have an OC when there's plenty of good characters that you might just want to use. So, when I approach OCs, what I want to try and do is make sure that they offer something that the main six don't. Like either they're a foil or they add something new. They can add a new perspective, do their own thing, and never interact with them, whatever. But you have to have characters that are not only affected by their world, but affected in a way that we don't see all the time. And I'm not saying you have to be 100% original, because we all know that it's not happening. But if you're going to have a really ultra smart unicorn with like a lot of potential Charlotte Glimmer, and and you have Twilight Sparkle, you have to really put a twist to it, because otherwise it's just a copy paste. And no one wants to read the exact same character when it comes to there's no slides, sorry. Do not steal. So yeah, most of that is just basically that really threw me off. It was like,
I'm sorry. I don't
it's
know what
okay, I
problem.
forgive you.
You just missed the glory of Iron Curtain.
Well, original characters are a great way to have like this Watson experience. There's going to be something that we all have seen, but the original character is the best way to explore that and present a completely new, unique idea that kind of like resonates with how you look at something. It doesn't have to be a self-insertion, but at the same time, explain the world and the situations from a completely different angle.
I'm going to speak a bit about, and I touched on this in the romance panel as well, the utility when it comes to developing OCs. Now, we've talked a lot about OCs sort of as a standalone character, the traits that will help you fill them out. But if you look at an OC, it's not a standalone character. It exists to further the plot, to interact with other characters. It's the ligaments in the skeleton of the story. And without the story of which these characters are a part, then there's nothing to tell. So first, I would suggest, as a general rule in all fiction, think of your story first, the story you're trying to tell, the themes that you want that story to tell, and the sorts of interactions that you want to use to advance that story. To give a few examples, let's look at Pinkie Pie. So it's always best to start with an existing character and an existing premise. So Pinkie Pie has a place where she gets her more obscure party weaponry or party cannons and other sorts of things. So then you think, all right, I'm telling this story, whether as part of a broader story, as part of a one-shot. So Pinkie goes to wherever she buys these things. Now, what sort of character could be interesting to use, all right, vis-a-vis Pinkie herself? Now, Pinkie is, of course, energetic, spastic. So this opens up a number of possibilities for an original character to be her, party dealer. Maybe it's a shady character on the street who has a trench coat with, all sorts of weird party gimmicks in it. Or maybe she goes to this typical, black market dealer that we'd see in movies, except the black market dealer is dealing in, party-related stuff. Or maybe she just goes to someone who's just as spastic as she is, and the person's just like, oh, Pinkie, you're here. And Pinkie's like, yes, I'm here. Oh, boy, you're going to buy stuff. And you're like, yes, I'm going to buy stuff. So you have a lot of options, all right, to fit into that square hole in the story, all right? But it still has to fit into that square hole. And that's what you should think of first when you come up with your OCs. Why am I creating this OC? What is this OC doing? Who is this OC meant to primarily interact with, and then later who might have further interactions with? And from there, once you have the basic idea of what your OC must do, will do, should do, then you can add flavor to the OC. Because a lot of the time, your original characters are not going to need to be flavorful, because they're going to be there for perhaps one scene, or they might be in the background. They may not even have a name. But when you're talking about the larger, more developed OCs, then that's when you want to add flavor. You want to add kick. You want to add a little zazz, as Metalocalypse might call it. And because that way they'll stick out in people's minds, and when they pop up again, people will say, oh, this is going to be weird, or this is going to be funny, or this is going to be awkward, which is also good. So always keep in mind the broader picture for your original characters. And second of all, once you have the broader picture, then you can go down to the minutia of maybe more of what this character's background is, why this character is the way this character is. How did this party person get into smuggling party cannons across the border or anything like that? And then you can have, once it's established a little bit, then you can have that character go off on a divergence about how they smuggled party cannons across the Cambodian border or something like that. And they knew all these things. Yeah, while Pinkie just kind of listens going,
Chrysalis, can you just please write this story now? I want to see this, a black market trader.
Yeah, Pinkie's black market party dealer.
No.
The crowd has spoken.
Right. Seriously. All right, I might, but that person would be like a total drunk pony.
PG.
I'm going to arrange for a timer to be put on your user page in FanFiction, so everyone can see how long you're taking.
Just
thank you. You would. So, yes. So keep in mind your stories above your OCs, and for the most part, I think if you keep that broader picture, and if you know the story you're trying to tell and your character's roles in it, then I actually don't think most people will have too much problem with your original characters, because your original character could be a freaking red and black alicorn, but if the red and black alicorn serves a legitimate purpose, then I think that people will, overlook it, especially if that red and black alicorn's legitimate purpose is getting killed or something. But this, I think, will also flow into what Wanderer D was talking about, and will probably continue talking about, which is more about the world. in which these characters take place.
Well, to bounce off of what you were saying, and what I was trying to say a little bit earlier, sort of, is, when you're writing your story and like keeping it open, I'm going to basically put this in the perspective of readers and writers. You have a very clear idea of what you want to do with your character, and selling it to your readers, which are most of the time naturally resistant to new, unexplained, or like completely original characters. It's good to embrace the way that you're introducing them, and leaving it open so you can, like as you were saying, just explore as you go. One of the things that ended up happening with the OC Slam Jam, for those that didn't venture into that hellish experiment of writing, it was a hellish experiment of writing. No. And it was that eventually, even though we were supposed to just grab our character and the original character of someone else and basically imagine something completely new, and kind of like a standalone story, what ended up happening is people started creating their own little worlds, and the more you read from one character as they somehow survived the vicious comments and voting and went on to the next level, you started learning a lot more about their history, and how effective you truly are when bring it out to 5 points, or having a general description of your character for other people to interpret them. So a character that you intend to get through to people as methodical and calm comes across as a really pompous, creature for another author, even though it's the exact same description that you provide. They're not making it up. So again, it's a working process. You're never going to get everything out at the beginning. When you introduce your character, it has to grow. As much as you know the story behind the character, and as much as you can boil down the main aspects of them and introduce a few of them, when you get in, always give yourself the chance to just make them grow and help them grow, even if you can even go and do flashbacks from time to time.
You ready to do questions?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right. So the second half of the panel is for questions and extended discussion. So if anybody has a question, we have a microphone stand there that hopefully will have.
Has no microphone.
Yes, that has a microphone.
He has a microphone.
Yes.
Hi.
There is no.
Now, I should inform you, this is a very special microphone, in that if your question starts with, "My OC is," you will receive a massive electrical shock. Thus immediately clearing the way for whoever stands behind you and a more extended discussion. So ask away.
Form a line right here.
Also works as a defibrillator.
Also, when you're creating worlds for the OC Slam Jam, don't use zombies. You get kicked out real fast.
Please keep the questions PG, and in the interest of answering as many questions as we can, please try to make your question as simple as possible. If you have something more to add to the discussion, our authors will be in Quills and Sofas
If you have long questions about writing advice that's very specific to your story, we will all be in Quills and Sofas after this, Sofas and Quills, which I don't remember. Quills and Sofas after this event, and can offer more specific advice.
Even though there's no quills or sofas.
Pens and chairs.
There's pens and chairs.
And a
All
typewriter.
right,
Let's get
all right,
this
let's do
going.
this.
So, what is each of your favorite OCs that you've ever created, and why do you think that they're the best OC in the fandom?
Loaded question.
Loaded.
Just quickly go down the list.
Iron Curtain, because he is Russian pony. Best pony.
Siren Song, because just really proud that she is a completely detestable character who does not overstay her welcome with the audience.
For me, it was Gout, this dragon character of mine who just was a lot of fun to write because she didn't seem to understand like the phrasing of, it's like I wrote her as a journal entry and she didn't understand like literary terms and would just play around with a lot of silly stuff, basically. It's fun to write.
Mango, because he won the Slam Jam. No, seriously, I love writing. I think my favorite OC that I've ever written is Hidden Tail. the changeling that works for Celestia as head of her spy network, because I've just used him in several stories, and like sometimes he's there obviously and sometimes not, and people don't even notice, which is actually kind of fun.
I think, I don't know if I have one particular favorite. Two of my favorite to write were both from Platinum Crown. One was Ritter Cruz, who was of Wonderbolt, who basically joined the Wonderbolts because she loves violence. And she's a pony who loves violence and understands that she's in a society that abhors violence, and identifies more with other species and acts out. And she's turned into a very interesting Blood Knight type character that was always a ton of fun to write because she was so aggressive and suicidal, like a Rainbow Dash cranked up to 15. The other one, most of my OCs are antagonists. The other one would be Antimony, who started off Platinum Crown basically as a dark counterpart to Rarity, that she had a lot of the same highly cultured interests. She was generous in her own ways, but was also supremely arrogant and overconfident with a strange view of the social hierarchy and other things. So again, antagonist original characters. I don't think I've written any like protagonist original characters ever.
Next up.
Okay, so if you were challenged to create a Mary Sue character with as many Mary Sue qualities as possible, but to make them as compelling and interesting and like good characters, how would you achieve that through writing? It is possible. I have done it.
I would just use Starlight Glimmer. What else do you need?
Yeah. What I would say is the classic traits of being a Mary Sue, like that they're super powerful and that everyone loves them and that they're the prettiest princess. Those are not what makes a Mary Sue. What makes a Mary Sue is that they are not a compelling character. Because Starlight Glimmer does have a lot of the traits of being a Mary Sue. She is a unicorn who's as powerful as Twilight, and the main six instantly forgive her. And you can make an argument those are less than ideal character traits, but she's not a Mary Sue because she is not played to the point that the audience hates her. So I would say kind of by definition, you cannot write a Mary Sue as a sympathetic character.
I'd say Flash Sentry who hates being Flash Sentry.
Yes.
Yes, that's true.
Every day he comes in and hates the fact that he's Flash Sentry. And everyone loves him, but he just doesn't want anything to do with any of it.
Huge story idea.
The mob has spoken.
Yeah.
I look forward to reading all of these.
Like, in that vein, just like doing it in a comedy.
He's like,
would
I'm
work
not
just
even
fine.
good. My guitar playing is terrible. Why does everyone love it? Like, ding, emotional thoughts, ding. I'm so deep. And everyone's just like fawning over him. He's like, you idiots! I'm terrible!
All right, that's perfect.
Hello there. I was just curious, what convinced you to make your OCs? Like, what was your inspiration? Okay. What was your?
How are they getting feedback all the way over there?
Just keep backing out until you're in the hallway, then just keep going.
I'm sure there's a
going.
physical explanation to this.
So your question is, how do we come up with the ideas for these OCs?
Yeah, for your OCs, yes.
For me, it was for the OC Slam Jam. I just wanted to make an interesting character. And I came up with Iron Curtain just because I wanted a crazy communist character that, when you introduce into a scene, would just be funny.
I'm going to steal a minute of time because there's a story behind this one. Because when I first wrote Siren Song, she was just supposed to be an action hero. She was heroic and noble and bold and all of those things. And I submitted to the pre-readers and it came back rejected. That was one of the most boring stories I've ever read. And it went through several revisions, and I'm getting angrier and angrier and angrier that my story's getting rejected. And finally, at 2 in the morning, one of the pre-readers says she's just not awesome enough. So I go, fine, you want a more awesome version? I'll show you a more awesome version. And I wrote a version of Siren, pretty much out of spite, who cannot do anything right. She messes up everything she touches, but she's the narrator, and as the narrator constantly talks about how amazing and awesome and wonderful she is. Submitted that, and it came back from the pre-readers, that is the best version of any of your characters I've ever seen. Write an entire book about this person. And I spent a while trying to figure out why that happened. And that really helped me learn a lot more about writing good OCs, and ultimately is what led to Siren.
For me, most of the OCs I've come up with, like I said, I did like world building alliance stuff, which is essentially where you would build up other like non-pony races. And for most of those OCs, it was basically I have a setting, say Zebraca. I have a story I want to tell, say I want to explore the idea of the shamanism in Zebraca, and so the natural progression from that is now I have a set of zebra shaman OCs, and then I would just develop them from there like I would any other OC.
Well, I mean, in my case, it really depends on what I want the OC to do in the story. I guess, like the most developed one would, like, being Mango Leaf, was again for the Slam Jam, which again was hell. And basically, my idea was, okay, so I had a sort of an idea of what I wanted to write for the first story, and then I was up in the air as to what would happen. But I wanted to have someone that would struggle to really be able to sell anything during the winter. So I thought that the best candidate would be a guy from Hawaii that likes, that develop a love for frozen yogurt and makes his livelihood out of it. So he's going to Ponyville to sell frozen yogurt in winter.
You already know about my characters. They were created because there were purposes that needed filling. I needed character archetypes, and I needed character antagonists or the occasional protagonist or former acquaintance. So they filled the roles that were necessary, and then from there, I expanded on them. It also, I'll add, was a great opportunity because you could see how people reacted to the initial character, and the more popular characters could then get a little bit more attention and development, and the less popular characters could kind of be pushed to the wayside, and so you had a kind of vetting process as each chapter came through.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
I just want a quick reminder for myself. The fan fiction moderator, I just want to remember, what was your name again?
What?
Just your name, I can't remember.
Wanderer D.
Wanderer D?
Yeah.
All right, that's
It's
all.
okay. No one's ever heard of me. It's fine.
Yeah, that's fine. Don't worry. I've been added onto the FanFiction website for almost 2 years now, so don't worry about it.
I'm no worries.
Just a little question: if you were to ship your OCs with any MLP character, who would it be?
I think I can speak for all of us and say Princess Celestia, for all of them, for all the characters ever, Princess Celestia.
I disagree with that.
Well, it's okay.
The
You're allowed to be
OC
wrong.
that I created for the OC Slam Jam, Luster Locke, was actually originally designed to be shipped with Trixie. So that's the answer I'd go with. Like, her whole backstory, like she has a past with Trixie. She used to be Trixie's escapology act, and they had a falling out, and just the whole idea was in the future they'd get back together. So.
Aaron Curtin has no time for that.
I would just, depending on the character. Hidden Tail wouldn't actually try to date Celestia because he sees her as a mother figure. I wrote a Griffin that is dating Octavia. So, it just depends on the character. I mean, it's like a human being. Not the same person ever here would date exactly the same other person. So.
Most of my OCs are designed kind of to be incompatible with the main characters in that way. Though I guess Ritter Cruz would probably French kiss Rainbow Dash. Yeah, she definitely would. Just for fun.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so my awesome OC. Ow!
I warned you.
It happens.
Okay. I'd like to hear a couple of your thoughts on the advantages and disadvantages of using OC versus canon characters beyond the obvious one that the canon one probably gets me more readers. So say I have a character that's very similar to Rarity but differs from her in one or two significant ways. So I can either create an OC to fit that mold, or I can do something in my story to justify why those things have changed about Rarity.
Always use a canon character if you possibly can. That's a general rule I abide by, at least. Only resort to original characters if you can't reasonably get a canon character to fill that same slot.
I disagree. I know, it's unprecedented.
This slam.
No. So I would say straightforwardly, the advantage of the canon character is that the reader is going to come in with a lot of preconceptions about who that character is and what they're like. And if those preconceptions are either, if they're correct, they save you the time of establishing the character, or if they are incorrect, and the twist is that they are incorrect. Like if you're saying, this is an AU version of Rarity who is actually, the bad guy or something like that. Actually, that might be kind of believable for Rarity, but you know what I mean. If the fact that the reader's preconceptions are incorrect is the twist, go for it. But if you're writing a character who is just different from Rarity in a way that the reader's preconceptions about Rarity will just leave them confused or feeling like this is a poorly written version of Rarity, then do it with an OC.
I would, like as a quick example, and I know you read the story, The Glassblower. It's by Colin Ingardez. I feel it's an amazing, incredible story. That the downside it has is that it's using Rarity as a main character, and that isn't Rarity. So he should have just used an OC.
Well, yes, you do obviously have to know when to stop using canon characters.
Yeah, but that's the same point. Like sometimes it's just if you're going to twist the character that much that it doesn't make sense to be the same character.
Yeah, but let's be honest, the show itself has twisted the characters from time to time.
But it's the show.
But it is the show.
It is the show. They can get away with it.
The characters are sufficiently flexible that you can use them in, surprise race. For example, no one would be surprised if like Pinkie Pie showed up to do something like Applejack needs help with some like electrician, and then Pinkie Pie shows up. Oh yeah, I know that. Because it's Pinkie Pie.
Yeah.
Who is among the most flexible of all characters.
But like put it in context, are you Mae Larson?
Ah, yeah.
So
well, do I give everything wings? I'm not Red Bull.
All right.
So I will give actually one quick example from a fic I know you've read because you edited it. From Siren Song, there was one character in that story named Green Apple, who is a relative of Applejack, and in many respects, she's a lot like Applejack. She's traditional, she's very strict in her ways, she has a lot of Apple family pride, all of that. But she is also a character who is deeply, deeply vain. And in deciding whether that character was going to be Applejack or not, it is way easier to say this is an OC who has some traits in common with Applejack, but also some fundamental character traits that are very different from Applejack, than to go through all the effort of saying this is Applejack, but, and then reversing all the reader's preconceptions about Applejack being a humble character.
Yeah.
So what's the deal with those red and black alicorns? You don't have to answer that.
The red ones go faster. It's true.
That makes so much sense. Our actual question was, how self-aware should an OC be with regards to their actions and their motivations? Like, if they do something, then someone else sees it, and then they challenge them or ask them why they would do that. Like, how aware of themselves can they be, and when they give their justification? Like, should they be wholly aware and wholly honest, or would they actually be somewhat skewed like real people are?
I don't think you can apply that. I don't think that's something you can just apply blanketly to all OCs. Like, that sounds like an individual person's personality. It would be an individual decision based on the character that you want to create.
And it goes in both directions. Like, you can have a character who's flawed because they're not self-aware of their actions, that they don't stop to consider their place in the world. Or you can have the character who's flawed because they can't stop overthinking everything they're doing, that they have to fully consider all possible context of every action they take to the point it becomes paralyzing. Like was said before, knowing which character is right and wrong for which situation. Like, if you're writing a political drama, the character who will stop and carefully think through all possible implications of their actions before acting might be ideal for that situation. Whereas if you are writing, an interpersonal drama or a romance, the character who stops and fully considers every possible implication of saying "I love you" before they do is not the right character for a romance. So different levels of introspection can be advantageous or they can be flaws depending on the circumstance.
And I just want to say it because someone has to. Just because an OC is a red and black alicorn, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad character. It's what you do with it that makes it a good or a bad character.
In regards to the 5 adjectives rule you mentioned and the getting into the head of your OC to see how they would react to a situation, what would be some advice you would give to authors who have trouble getting to the head of an OC, especially a main OC, whose professions and lifestyle is significantly different from their own, to make them more believable?
So I would look at it as a matter of 2 things, which is expectations and habits. Or to put that another way, we don't stop and consciously think about every single thing we're going to do before we do it. We have built up habits, both interpersonally and over the course of our lives, which can be, little interpersonal things, like if someone makes eye contact with me, that's an aggressive gesture. I react to that instinctively without consciously thinking about it.
So you're like in Pokemon.
Yes, exactly like in Pokemon. Or it can be things like, if a character was born rich or nobility, they are used to being the most important person in the room, and so their habit is, I can just interject myself into any conversation I want, and that's not rude, because whatever I have to say is more important than what they were talking about. So think about what habits your character has developed over the course of their life that they may not be fully aware of.
And my main advice is do a lot of research, do a lot of reading. If it's not a profession just read about it. Find people who have done that career and figure out what their personality was like if you're having trouble to get into that character's mind. That way you can learn more about them and get into that certain mind frame.
Research is essential.
Read all the time.
One other thing. I will also, for a character when I'm sometimes struggling with that, list a handful of quirks, which are not major aspects of their character, but that kind of round it out. Like with Siren, when she is under stress, she will use the word right as a placeholder. Or she reads a lot of self-help books and is embarrassed about that fact. Little things like that can help you get in a character's head.
So, a lot of what I've heard about having a character is that they need a flaw of some sort. It doesn't have to be a big one, but they do need to be flawed in some way. What's a minor flaw that you could have for a character? Because other than alcoholic, I'm coming up blank.
The flaws, I think, are really there just for you, the writer, to maintain discipline so that you don't go completely overboard. You can have a character who has no particular glaring flaws and maybe some slight gains, especially if it's a minor character that doesn't particularly matter all that much. It's a general rule that's often said to think of your character's flaws. And it's not a bad thing, but don't obsess over saying, well, this character needs a flaw. Let me think, I gotta give them a flaw. Ideally, if you're organically fitting the character into the story and the setting, and if you're thinking about the interactions that this character will have with other characters, then flaws will come to you as long as you know basically what other people and what kind of flaws they have. Think of your friends and the flaws they have. Think of your politicians and the many flaws that they have. And then it will usually come to you, or at least it comes to me, just what flaw is most appropriate. Don't stress yourself over coming up with flaws. Let them develop naturally, just like the positives develop naturally.
If you force them, it's just going to probably make your life a lot more difficult.
Yeah. Or worse, you'll come up with something that's completely obvious, like is afraid of the carpets.
Spiders.
Carpets is
allergic to adorableness.
That's a strange flaw.
It's fatal in ponies.
My one thing, just look at Stanley when he's done. He's the best at that stuff.
Like, what I would say is just, you can't look at giving a character a flaw as just like checking off a box. You have to fit it in with everything else about that character. You have to, like, the goal, of course, has to be deepening them, not just, like, adding the superficial, hey, they have a flaw, so.
Yeah, I would say it's like, just to finish this whole little section, I would say it's situational, because even something that's a perk of that character can be a flaw in the right situation. So someone that is proud and, and strong, like, can be a perfect, like in a perfect situation, maybe when stress is happening, but, being proud and strong in the wrong place is going to get you in trouble.
How do you personally know when an OC is complete in your mind? Like, how do you know when they're as fleshed out as you think they can be?
No character is ever as fleshed out as it can be. There's always room for every character to grow, canon or original character. But practically speaking, you usually don't want to go like too overboard. I mean, I might get some frowns at this, but that's like the Tolkien-ish approach, where you go into like the long lineage of something, and it becomes like the Book of Job, and it's like this begat this, begat this, begat this. And we don't need 10,000 years of history on every little thing, and we don't need the deepest details of background from the get-go. Let it trickle out. In fact, that's a nice teaser, you know, a little bit of information, a little bit more information. And I think readers generally prefer that to info dumps. Yeah.
Running short on time, so let's keep it going with the questions.
What are your opinions on how many people just seem to give their characters broad traits, like arrogance? Arrogance is a trait that can be found in many different individuals, but the way it is shown can vary. For example, with Trixie, she's very arrogant in a theatrical way, while Rarities can sometimes manifest in vanity that can contradict her generosity.
A good point. Was the question more, should we avoid these broad strokes?
Yeah,
then the answer is yes.
Traits more.
Yes, you should, but that's part of understanding the characters and how your character fits into the story you're telling. If you have an arrogant character, but the character is like theatrically arrogant, but in the actual story, you know, they're mostly going to just be interacting with each other, then you end up with more of a comedy because, you know, one character is interacting with the other character and the other character is just like, I don't have to deal with you, you know, and it comes off as more comical than anything else.
I love Rarity.
Yeah. Oh, that is I love Rarity.
Or self-loathing Flash Sentry.
Yeah, self-loathing Flash.
I do want to emphasize, just in case there was a misunderstanding on that, the 5 adjectives rule is a great rule of thumb for doing the very early outlining, for just thinking about how this character. It is not an excuse to not do your research, as was mentioned, nor is it an excuse to not fully appreciate how your character fits into the world. But if you're just trying to get a handle on what are the basics of how to make this character interesting, it's a great step 1, just to clarify that.
Always do research.
Yeah.
Hello there, it's me again, Be Afraid. My question really pertains to sort of, all right, crap, I'm sorry, I'm bad at this. So a lot of what you guys are saying, how to build original characters for My Little Pony, sounds a lot like advice one would give for just creating characters in general in a literary sense. What would you say would be some unique challenges to creating original characters for an already existing property like My Little Pony or Steven Universe?
One big one is obviously that the world is already defined for you, and so your characters have this mold that they have to fit in. You can't shape your world around them. You have to shape them to your world.
Yeah, it's the setting. There are not a lot of butchers in Equestria, you know, so.
Though there was an excellent story about Equestria's one butcher.
Yeah, and the one guy
it's not a
sends to
profitable
Griffins.
business.
Yeah, 100% original character for a novel that you're writing is, you know, you have all the freedom to take them wherever you want, whereas in an intellectual property, you know, you have other characters that already feel that stuff, so.
For the most part, once you get OCs down in fan fiction, you really should be able to do it in, you know, your own original fiction as well. So yeah, these are universal rules for the most part.
Hello. I'm fairly new to the fan fiction end of writing, and I've noticed that the community isn't overly welcome towards stories that have the OC tag or don't include many canon characters in it. Is there a community or site in particular you could recommend to sharing your story and getting it out there for readers? Or is there no remedy for
There's
that?
groups that support authors that write original characters. I would say basically what I have seen from my side as a moderator and you know, dealing with this and all the little fights that come out of it is that a lot of people just don't want to give you a chance because they haven't seen you before or you don't have a following. But that should not discourage you because you're not writing, you know, you're not writing to just gain a bunch of people. And the people that give you their time and read your story, those are the guys that you should value, and those are the important people that are reading your story.
I think more so now than in the past, people go online looking for specific types of fiction or even very specific storylines. And if it's not to their exact taste, then they'll pass it, you know, they'll pass it along and keep looking for exactly what they want. So you're very right that it's hard for an OC-heavy story because most people are going online to read a Rarity story, a Fluttershy story, or Rarity story, or whatever. And if they don't get what they want, then they'll just pass.
Thank you very much.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay.
Hola.
This might be a general broad stroke question, but do you have any tips on character design? I rely heavily on symbolism, and I've seen tutorials that say symbolism is bad, don't do it. So.
I guess what I would say is, and don't actually answer this question, how do you feel about how you look? Like, to use myself as an example, I can say I'm tall. That's a traditionally masculine trait that is generally seen in a positive light. So that is something about my appearance I feel good about. But I don't have much upper body strength, which is something that is generally perceived as a negative trait. And these little things, to what extent do they influence my actions and behavior as an individual or my perception of myself? If your character's appearance matters to them or has influenced, their life, by all means put as much symbolism as you like into it. Otherwise, just make them pink. They're ponies. Like, pink is not a bad color. Or green.
Since I'm the last question here, I'm just going to make it simple. Does anyone hate green OCs?
Does anyone hate what?
Does anyone hate green OCs?
No.
No.
I know my lady Rarity thinks green is a pretty hideous color. But I like Lyra, so,
But you know that's
she's
because
not
she's
right about
secret.
She's aquamarine. All right. Thank you very much, and I
Thank you,
believe
guys.
we are out of time. Thank you. See you all next year.
We got all the questions.
Second panel to do that.